Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Post Pro. I'm Kevin Kubota and today we're going to talk about color management. I know what you're thinking. With a shirt like that, Kevin, we need to talk about your color management. Well, we will be right back and we're going to talk about it. Alright, I'm back and let's talk today about color management. Now, color management is probably one of the first things you want to think about in your workflow. So although we're introducing this a little later in our post-pro series here, it is an important part of everyone's workflow and something that you should pay attention to right off the start. So let's take a look at my screen here. This is an example of a world of color. This is color management in action here. So say for example, this is your world of color. All right, all the colors in the world. We can't see all these colors because it's beyond our spectrum, but they're there. Just trust me, they're there. And our computers and our monitors can only display or deal with a certain range of colors. So for example, this black line could be one color space. Maybe that's a monitor. And the inner defined line here, this white line, this might be another color profile. For example, your printer. Or a device that's going to manage or deal with the color. So it could be a printer, it could be a camera, or a different monitor. All right. So as you can see here, they all don't line up. Color is not the same to a computer as it is to the rest of the world, as it is to a monitor. So we have to use color management to massage these colors into something common, and that's what color sync and color management is all about. Let me show you another little picture here to help you make some sense of this. Wait, that's not the right picture. The guy's shooting with a cannon. Let's get rid of that one. Let's go to that one here. Here we go. Here's another example. This is a simplified example of color management. I'm going to show you something really cool, a little groovy, geeky way to visualize color space. Some of you, it's been confusing for a long time, and I'll show you in just a minute something that's going to make color management just make total sense to you once and for all. But let's start off with this. Here's your world of color. Whoop. This orange line, let's say, is a wide gamut, like Adobe RGB, right? Look at the colors it encompasses. Inside that, there's a smaller triangle, the yellow triangle here, and that's sRGB. It's a smaller gamut, so you have even less to work with. Now here's where that becomes interesting. This blue triangle is CMYK. So that's when you go to print. If you send images to a magazine, if you use any of these offset printing services like a Kubota or anybody who prints books from a CMYK printer process, they're using something similar to this color gamut. Now what do you notice here? Yes, you're right. CMYK extends beyond sRGB in certain areas. In other words, there are colors, even though it's a small color gamut, there are certain colors that sRGB can't even cover. So if you're working in sRGB with which a lot of photographers actually do in Photoshop, you're actually throwing away tons of information that you could be applying to get better color from your CMYK workspace, all right, or CMYK printing space. When you work in Adobe or a larger gamut, you're covering right here, you're covering all except for this one little spot right here, the entire range of CMYK, which means that you're going to at least get the most out of the CMYK print space. So let's take a look at it a little different way. And I'm going to pull up this groovy little thingamajig here. This is a 3D model of a color space, and this is Adobe RGB. So as it stands, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It looks like a color blob. Wow, color blob. What's interesting though is I can say hold this for comparison and put inside of it another color space like sRGB to compare the two. So here's sRGB on the inside in the color area and Adobe RGB on the outside, and look how much larger all the way around the gamut Adobe RGB is compared to sRGB. Well, we kind of already knew that, right, from our previous little simple diagram. But what we don't always know, or many photographers don't know, is how that affects your printing when you print to a lab. So let's compare them again. So if I'm going to look at, I have Adobe RGB as my locked color space here, and let's compare that to, for example, my monitor. Now if you have a really nice monitor like this one, this is an ISO, and I look at that profile for the ISO here, I'm going to turn that one on. You can see the color area is the ISO monitor profile, meaning I've profiled it. These are the colors that this monitor can display. It's really close to the Adobe RGB color space. See that there? Now if I hold the ISO, the monitor space in here, and bring up that sRGB to compare, look how much smaller sRGB is compared to this monitor. So in other words, if I'm working in sRGB, this monitor is actually capable of showing a lot more color than I can actually even use in sRGB. So these are really designed for high-end color work, matching Adobe RGB. But let's look at this even further. I'm going to go back to Adobe, lock that one in here to my little 3D model, and let's compare that to Bayphoto's print profile. Now when you go to a lab, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, when you sign up with the lab, they'll give you a color profile for their printer. And this is really important because you can soft proof, which I'm also going to show you in a minute here, and you know what their printer is capable of printing. So when I throw that Bayphoto profile in the middle with my RGB, I can see that it's completely enclosed in the RGB space. And this is good because Photoshop or their printing service, if I send them an Adobe RGB file, it will compress it, shrink it down to fit their printer space, and that's fine. It's going to throw away some information, but at least I'm going to take advantage of all their printer can do. So let's change this now and look at sRGB, and I'm going to hold that. So here's the sRGB space. So if you're working in sRGB, which is the default in Photoshop for a lot of people, whether you know it or not, if you're working in that color space and then you want to send your image to Bayphoto, check that out. This white area is the Bayphoto, or the sRGB, and Bayphoto is the color. Look how much of that sticks out beyond. That means it's beyond the sRGB color space. So their printer is capable of printing stuff that you won't even be able to touch because you're using sRGB. So you're shorting yourself of a lot of potential color from their printer. See that? And that's there's no reason to do that because you can work in a broader color space and get the full potential of the print shop you're working with. Let's compare this again with White House. Here's a White House custom color profile. Their printer sticks even further beyond sRGB. Again, the white frame here is sRGB. The colored box is White House custom colors profile for their printer. And look how much color in their printer is not even within the sRGB space, meaning you're not even going to get those colors. But if I was to use, I'm going to hold that one more time. This is the White House profile, and I use Adobe. Okay, Adobe almost completely covers their space. There's just a little bit here and a little bit there that is not covered by Adobe, but it's a lot more than the sRGB space. So this is why I suggest that you set Photoshop to work in Adobe RGB instead of sRGB so that you can take advantage of all your print lab has to offer. All right, let's now switch back to Photoshop. And let's take a look at an image. Crazy! This is Crazy Craig from Lens Babies, the inventor of the Lens Baby. And let's take a look at soft proofing. Now, how do we set up our Photoshop to take advantage of this? Now, color management is really pretty simple. Just a few little steps you need to follow. And one of them is to go into Photoshop and go to Edit, Color Settings. All right. And you want to look at your color settings and make sure that Adobe RGB is your color working space. You probably have it on sRGB, which is one of the defaults. All you have to do is switch it to Adobe RGB. I usually turn on where it says fewer or more options. Turn on more options so you can see the below parts here. Make sure Preserve Embedded Profiles is on for all these options. The engine is Adobe, ACE, and the intent could be relative or perceptual. I generally find that for photographic work, perceptual, changing it to perceptual will give you better color matching when you convert from one profile to another. And this will make more sense in just a minute. But go ahead and change it to perceptual for now. And leave all the other settings at their defaults. Now, your Photoshop is set to work in Adobe, meaning you're going to be working in this larger color gamut, massaging your files in this color gamut, sending it to the lab, potentially in this color gamut, so that you can take advantage of their custom profile, because they will convert it for you from Adobe to their color space of their printers. You don't need to worry about that. Click OK. And now we're going to talk about soft proofing. So Photoshop setup, you want to be able to know that what you see on your screen is what you're going to get from your printer, right? Well, the common problem with color management for most people is they don't quite understand, and I've done this for many years in the past, where I would make print after print on my inkjet printer trying to get it to match my screen, and it never quite did, until I realized that I was going about it backwards. I can't get my prints to match my screen, but what I can do is get my screen to simulate what my printer is actually capable of doing. See, I was trying to get my printer to do something it just wasn't physically capable of doing, which was printing colors the same as my screen. Once I figured that out, and I started working with labs and figuring that out, I realized that I don't have to change the print, I have to change my screen to show me what that printer is capable of doing. So here's how we do that. In Photoshop, you're going to go to View, Proof Setup, and let's take a peek at the Custom menu. Proof Setup means that it's going to show you, apply a color profile for a printer, and show you, change your screen literally to show you what it would look like from that printer. So I'll go to Custom, and in the Custom dialog box here, I have presets that I've already made for certain print labs, but I also could set one up custom, hence the name custom, and you just scroll through here and your device to stimulate, oops, I said device to stimulate, device to simulate, and choose the one for your printer. Now if you don't have it in here yet, let me show you how to get it in here. This is easy too. For example, when you go to your lab's website, they usually have in the customer section a place where you can download a color management kit or color profiles for their printers. I know Bayphoto has this, White House has this, and most grid labs have this. And here, for example, is a profile from Bayphoto. It's called Profile 2, but it's actually Bayphoto's color ICM profile. All you need to do is you select the profile that you download. You can copy it or drag it, and on a Mac you're going to go into your hard drive, into the library folder, and into Color Sync. All right. In Color Sync folder there's one for profiles, and you can make a folder in there for labs or just throw it right in that profile folder. So I would put it into lab and just paste Command V, and now it's in your system, so Photoshop and any program can use it. If you're on a PC, you guys actually have it a little easier to get these profiles in. On a PC, you would select it on your desktop, right click, and you'll see an option. You don't see it here because I'm on a Mac, but on a PC it would say install color profile or something to that effect. You just select that and boom, it's in your system. All right, now that it's in your system, back in Photoshop, you will see that profile listed in the available profiles. So this is Bayphoto's profile. Let's select it. And here again I can choose perceptual or relative colorimetric were the two best choices here to see how it will change the photo when I print it. I'm going to scoot it over a little bit, and if you turn your preview here on the right off and on, you can see the change on your screen. It's very slight. Okay, so try it with relative, try it with perceptual, turn it off and on. Now if you look at perceptual, to my eye, perceptual changes the image a little less, so I'm going to use perceptual as the default for this custom profile. So now I know this is what my print will look like if I send this image to Bayphoto. And really it's not too different from the original on screen, it's just a little less saturated in the oranges. And I'm okay with that, right? Look at my shirt. I got plenty orange. I don't need to worry about more orange in my prints. It's good. So, that's good. I click on Save. And I'll call this Bay Photo. Sometimes they'll have different profiles for different types of paper. And now that will be available here in your menu for you to softproof. Right, here's how you use it. You go to your view menu now, choose proof setup, and just grab that profile. So here's Bay Photo. As long as this check is on, proof colors, you'll know what you're looking at on your screen is what you should be getting from your lab. And the cool thing is, if you're not liking it, if you think, oh, it's a little too undersaturated or needs a little more punch, you can go here and do whatever manipulations you want, add curves to it, add a little more contrast, you can boost the saturation or whatever you want, and whatever you see now on your screen is the actual effect of those adjustments on the print. And that's really cool, and it's good to know. Most of the time, if you're working with a good lab, you should see very little shift in that image, which indicates that they are well calibrated and they're getting the most out of their printers, and they've given you a good profile to work with. So generally, once I do that soft proof, I double check the image, it's good to go. I don't have to worry about it. I just send them the image. Now when you go to save this, you go to File, Save As, go to my desktop, save it as a JPEG. Make sure you embed your color profile into the image. And this can be Adobe or sRGB, but again, I'm suggesting you work in it, save it in Adobe, because that's going to take advantage of all the color information that your printer has available. Save it and use JPEG quality 10 with baseline optimized. A lot of people have questions like, which quality setting, why shouldn't I use 12, give them the highest quality? Well, it's a waste of space and time, really. From quality 12, if you look at the difference here, my image is 411K, this is a low res image. By dropping it just to quality 11, it goes down to 309K, and by quality 10, 234, so almost half the size from 12 to 10, but there's no visual degradation of the quality. And we've done tests and compared the prints, large prints, at quality 10, quality 12, you get it back from the lab, you can't tell the difference. So why double the file size, double the time it takes you to upload those files? And your lab will probably tell you the same thing, because they don't want to deal with these big files either. It wastes their time. And baseline optimize will also give you a smaller JPEG file with a little better color. So these are the settings to use. Say OK, send it off to your lab, and what you see on your screen, as long as your monitor is calibrated, which is again another part of this whole equation, is get a spider, get one of those devices, i1, Color Monkey, calibrate your screens, make sure they're calibrated well, and once you do that, what you see is what you should get back from your lab. So that's color management in a nutshell. Hope it makes more sense. It's not that complicated actually. Once you get it dialed in, you just set it up and pretty much forget about it once you know those few key steps. So thank you very much. I'll see you next week on Post Pro with a different color shirt. Thank you for your comments. Don't forget to tune in next week on Post Pro, when I'm going to talk about fixing a little problem that you might have in Lightroom if your image capture date and time for multiple cameras don't match. That can be a big problem for some people when you're trying to synchronize them chronologically. So we're going to fix that and show you a couple other little tips in Lightroom on how to see what you want to see on your images. So tune in next week, Post Pro. See ya.